Not quite Glendon, it's the online version. So
Still the
um,
same.
it's still the same, it's still
Yeah.
Glendon. So, as we're not all gathered in the same space, we recognize that this land acknowledgement might not be for the territory that you're currently on. Si c'est le cas, nous vous demandons de prendre la responsabilité de reconnaître le territoire traditionnel sur lequel vous vous trouvez et les titulaires actuels du traité. We recognize that many indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. Glendon, en tant que partie intégrante de l'Université York, reconnaît sa présence sur le territoire traditionnel de nombreuses nations autochtones. The area, known as Toronto, has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and it is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon, One Pun Bell Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. And it's now time to for us all students to listen to our professor, John Steckley, who will be teaching us for the second time the basics of the Wendat language. So John, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you. Okay. I said something the last time, and I forgot something. I said there was only 2 Wendat place names in Ontario. There are actually 3. The third one, which I should know because actually I remembered it when I drove past it, is Orenda Road in Brampton. We were going to the Mandarin, and I always see that. Orenda is kind of a magic name. It's a noun in Wendat. It refers to prayer, to song, sometimes to dance, when dance is a spiritual dance, any spiritual activity. Joseph Boyden's novel, The Orenda, came from that name. He had read my book, The Words of the Huron, and which I had part of one of the chapters I talked about Orenda a lot because it had been written about before, but never with a Wendat perspective to it. So there are 3 then. There is Ontario, then there's a name that applies to a park not all that far from Glendon, Ethen-on-Wahawestea, which means where they had a beautiful life, right? And now Orenda, which I just talk about sort of, I translate it as spiritual activity because it's not a clear translation. Okay, so I've corrected myself. Probably in the next session, I'll say, you know how the last time I said, well, it turns out, anyway, I'm going to talk about what this one's about relationships. And I think words for relationships show a difference between Wendat and European languages such as French and English. So I thought it would be a good thing to have a look at it. If you want to read what I wrote about it quite some time ago, I wrote an article called Huron Kinship Terminology in 1993. You can, if you go to the Ontario Archaeological Society website, you can get a copy, right? So anyway, now, first of all, just going to talk about some basic relationships, children, parents, grandparents, grandchildren, husband, wife, brother, sister, those kind of things. The first thing I have to say is there is no word for daughter. There is no word for son. There is a verb to have as child, right? to have as child. There's no noun daughter or son, which was problematic for Brebeuf when he wanted to talk about the Trinity, the Father and the Son. Can't say it. You have to be someone's son and someone's father. Same thing with grandparents. There's a verb to be grandparent to. There's a verb to have as grandchild. There's no word for husband or wife. So you can't say, how people always say husband and wife, right? Rather than wife and husband. There's a verb to be spouses, okay? Again, there's no term for brother or sister. There's to have as sibling, no term for nephew or niece either, none of these. Okay, so that being said, I'll introduce you to some words. So these words that we have so gendered in English and French are not so gendered in the sense of it's not built into the main word. It's not in a noun, it's not in a verb. It comes from the pronominal prefixes. Okay. If you are addressing your child, you would address your child, whether son or daughter, as ayi, and it means my child, ayi, my child. You only would use this when addressing one of your children. Now, if I'm talking to somebody and I'm referring to I'm talking to someone who is male or female, and I want to talk about their daughter, I would use the term shi'a, which means you have her as child, your daughter. So shi'a, you have her as child, your daughter. The gender comes from the pronominal prefixes. Now, for son, it would be Haitiana. You have him as child, your son, right? Your son. Now, there's an A sound at the end of these words. This is something called the diminutive. It's kind of like French and English and many European languages, in that when you use a diminutive form, it's a term of affection. It's a term of affection. So the at the end of these two words refers to, it literally translates as little, but it just says, no, affection. There's affection here. Right? Now, also to be noticed is that the older person in the relationship is always the subject. It's the agent term, but agent is subject. The younger one is always the patient or object. Okay? So I referred to this in that article I mentioned as mandatory respect. They did have great respect for age, for elders. Here it's built right into how you say something. Saying it any other way, you would be misleading, you would be wrong. So the respect for the relationship is based on the older one, is built into the language, right? It's built right in. Now, you can also talk about, you can get equality, but the equality is if you use a term for we. Now, to do that, you add what is called the reflexive voice. The reflexive voice. Let's talk about a mutual relationship. So if I want to mention to a child of mine, we are parent and child, I would say chatati ea. We too are parent and child. We too are parent and child. And of course, it has that the ah in the ending because it is a term of affection. It is a term of affection. So it's talking about equality here. We are in this relationship. We are these people. Okay, any questions so far? I know I kind of leap ahead because I know this stuff, but you have any questions, anything you don't understand, please. Yeah. Okay, grandparents and grandchildren. Now, when you are addressing your grandparent, you say, Ashuta'a. And it's a way of saying, my grandparent, mother or grandmother or grandfather, either one, doesn't matter. You would use the same thing. So if you're addressing one and then the other, you would use Ashuta'a for both of them. Now, if you're addressing your grandchildren, one of your grandchildren, you would just say Ashio. Doesn't have the A this time, I don't know why, but it just has it to distinguish between the two. So again, there's a term of address that's just for that. Okay? It's just for that. Now, I think I may have written it in the Wendat form here, so I'll be sure to say it several times in the Wendat form, because a lot of this stuff I transposed from when I was working as the tribal linguist for the Wendat of Oklahoma. Okay. Oyuashuta, she is our grandmother. Now, I put that term in there again, right? I'm doing the referencing, but the one being mentioned first is the grandmother, the she. Now, this term is used, of course, for grandmothers. I mean, it literally means, she is our grandparent. Literally translated, she is our grandparent. Now, you could also use that term, and this relates to a traditional story, for a toad. Now, that doesn't sound very complimentary to us. What do you mean calling an old woman like a toad? No, but what's here is, in the traditional story, it begins, there's two worlds, just a world in the sky and the world down here. The world down here has animals in it, and it's covered with water, which have been really rough for the rabbits. In the sky, there were people. A young woman is driven out of the sky. There are various different versions. Her brothers did it, or there were things that, anyway, she falls from the sky and is rescued by geese, which in Huron are yahonk, which is a good name for geese because you'll never forget it when you hear a goose. Now, they take her to the back of the turtle. We're on Turtle Island, on the turtle, okay? Whoops. Okay. Okay, so
it was my idea, John, just so that everybody can follow the lesson.
Great. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that.
It'll come back. Sorry.
Okay. It did.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So they had to, you can't just live on the back of a turtle. Don't ever try it. You'll slide off. So the great divers all tried to go down because she fell with a tree, and there was earth at the bottom of the roots of the tree. So the great divers tried. The beaver tried first because he had a very strong opinion of himself and thought, well, hey, if anybody's going to do the diving, it's me. I'm the beaver. Hey, don't mess with me, right? And then when the beaver fails, well, the muskrat's really happy to give it a try because then he can show up the beaver, right? He's always trying to show up the beaver. Anyway, he tries and fails. Then a small, relatively quiet female voice is heard, and it's a female toad. She dives, takes an incredibly long time, but comes up with the earth to put on the back of the great turtle. And because of her role in that, she is referred to as Oyoashitu A'a, our grandmother, right? Because she had a grandmother's role in establishing where we live. Okay, so that's why I had to mention that one, because I like that. It's funny because when we had some toads in our basement window well, Angie, my wife, and I were referring to, well, we'll have to put out some water and some food for the grandmothers in the backyard. And I think people misinterpreted it. They've got old women in the backyard, and but no, we don't. We had toads. We haven't had any recently, but I always look forward to seeing them.
Somebody had their hand up a while back.
Okay. All right, sure.
Nathan?
Sure. I'll just be walking us back a few minutes ago.
Sure.
Am I crazy, or you said that this is the Wyandotte language, and it wouldn't?
No, it's the Wendat. It's the Wendat.
It's the Wendat. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
Wendat, yeah.
Okay.
Wendat and Wyandotte are two dialects of the same language. And I had initially created this part of this discussion in Wyandotte. And I neglected in a couple of cases to transpose it.
Can I use them both indistinctively, or are we gonna? If I'm calling someone at the Wyandotte Reserve, could we use the same sort of? Could we be understood if I were to use the Wendat?
For the most part, yes. For the most part, yes. Their language their dialect has an M in it, where in Wendat we have like a YW or something. But generally speaking, there's not much of a difference, and you'll be able to figure it out. It's like going to different parts of Canada and understanding, what they say. I mean, it's probably less different than Newfoundland English is from Toronto English. Took me months before I learned how to use it. Now I'm fluent in Newfoundland, but took me a while, and they understood what I was saying. So there's not a big problem. There's not a big problem. Right?
Thank you.
Peter's got a question too, and Marie-Christine. So Peter?
I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Non, on ne vous entend pas, Peter. Pourtant, vous n'êtes pas sur mute.
Still not there.
Dans le chat, Peter. Marie-Christine, pendant que Peter tape sa question.
Yes, I have a quick question, John, regarding the diminutive ha for little.
Yeah.
As a French speaker, I found it strange that you have this diminutive in grandparent, but not in grandchild.
I know. I don't understand that myself. To be honest, I don't understand that. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. Maybe if the people had to choose, giving respect to a grandparent is more important than giving respect to a grandchild. That's a guess. That's a guess. Because grandparents were so very, very important. Now that diminutive also appears in terms for pets.
Okay.
A dog or a cat. It also refers to the main tools that people had. If I were to say my axe, I could say, how would I say it? Yetoya means my axe. Now, if you're talking about my pot, not talking about the drug, but a kettle or pot, you would say something like Wendat, datsa, and that would be my little pot, right? Because pots were very important because they made corn soup. which is, one of the, the main food of the people. So it becomes, it has that similar relationship, like a familial relationship.
Yeah. Okay.
So, sorry, Peter's question, does achihuta, sorry about the pronunciation,
That's right.
function as a noun or only, as you said, a term of address?
It's only a verb. Okay. There is no noun. There's no noun. There's only the verb, right? These relationships are all indicated by verbs. There are many, many more verbs than there are nouns in Wendat. And same with all of the Iroquoian languages. There's many, many more, right? It's how they function. Actually, in my experience with indigenous languages in Algonquian, like Mi'kmaq and Innu and that, and Anishinaabe one. So the same thing. Same thing with Inuktitut, which I studied for a year. You build a verb. It's the main thing you do, you build a verb.
Okay.
And that's most of the grammar, is you learn to build a verb. Syntax is relatively unimportant.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a linguistic theorist and you bought into whether it was Noam Chomsky, before he became a very, very good political commentator, was a linguist, and he came up with this way of thinking about generation that set an English model on all languages, which of course eventually got rejected. But no, you can't. These languages are verby languages, very verby. And you learn there are 8 positions in a verb. And you can have words with all 8 filled.
Okay, thank you, John. Ian had the question, he put it in the box, but your mic is on. Ian, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll read my chat message. And this is it's not just a language, it's not a linguist's question, it's a language nerd question.
Good. I like those.
I like that too. I like it too. The subject-object idea of relationships is certainly something that European languages have always held as fundamental for, well, as you said, under Chomskyanism, all languages.
Yeah.
And even agent-patient tends to be, subject-object, but with role descriptions.
Yeah.
I love the mandatory respect feature, but what I'm wondering is, can we get away from subject-object relations in many of these verbs? Can we see them as simply relational? These are the two folks involved in this verbal expression, and we're not going to a priori categorize them as one acting on the other.
But what you do for that, for most of them, I think I have one example that's different. I do have one example. You can use the reflexive voice, and then it's talking about two in the relationship. But also, and I'll jump ahead to this, there's no term for husband or wife. And what you do with that is there's no distinguishing between the two, the husband and the wife, in a subject or object position. It's always the two. It's always the two. So if I want to say, and I'm talking to my wife, and saying basically, hey, we are spouses, I would say cha tanoha, which means we two, inclusive, are spouses. Right? We would use that. Now, if I'm talking to somebody else that's not my wife, and I'm talking about my wife and myself, like saying, my wife and I like to go to Dairy Queen on a Thursday night to have blizzards. I would say ayitanoha. And what that means is we two, exclusive of you, the listener or listeners, are spouses. right? So there's no subject object. You can't say that. There's only an agent, and it encompasses both players. Okay, so it's a good term that way. It's a good term that way, right? I really like that they don't, that linguistically they're equals. I like that a lot.
Thank you, John. Lilia's got a question too.
Okay, shoot. Whoops. You're muted.
Lilia, on t'entend pas.
Yes, you say there are more words, more verbs describing, but is there a difference between what a verb express? Does it express an action or a state, or you see, is there a difference between the position in the sentence between a verb and a noun, for example?
Okay.
How do they define those categories? I mean, if it is defined, I don't know.
They're defined structurally.
That's it.
Yeah. And a noun root can be incorporated into a verb. Now, you can be referring to a state. There's an aspect. All verbs have pronominal prefixes, roots, and aspects. The most commonly occurring aspect is called the stative. It means to be in a state. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it usually refers to being in a state, usually a verb. I can say usually for that. It can be a repeated action. That's the habitual. It can be a single action. That's the punctual. It can mean intended action or predicted action or state. And then it's the purposive. So depends on the aspect. Depends on the aspect.
I see. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Marie-Christine and Peter, are these new hands or old hands?
Good one.
Okay. Thank you. Nope. Okay. Could you please put them down so that I don't get confused? I'm confused.
Okay.
Thank you. Peter's got a question, a real one. Yeah. So
Sure.
it's similar to the Russian aspect of verbs.
Okay.
That's what he's asking.
I don't know Russian that well, so I'm not going to make a statement on that. I know a little bit about it, but I don't know enough to be able to talk about their equality that way.
Okay, so that'll be for next lesson, I guess.
Yeah, I'll do my little Russian research.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Okay, now, where was I before I shifted over? Okay. Now, let's see. There are two verbs that you use for siblings. One of them is the one I presented before. I think I presented before. Yeah, I think I did. No, I didn't. Yeah, there's no term for brother or sister, right? You can't say brother, you can't say sister. You can refer to those that we know of as brother or sister, and people will know you're referring to them, but there's no explicit reference to brother or sister. Now, there's another term which means sibling of the opposite sex. Now, these are people, this is referring to someone of the opposite sex that you can't marry. So if someone belongs to your clan, you might use this term, saying because you cannot marry someone within your clan. When I was writing Wendat history, there was one guy who was fairly significant, and then he married somebody of his own clan, and he drops like a stone in the politics of the people because he did something that was considered disgusting. It was a kind of incest to marry someone who is your cousin that way. Okay, so if you'd say, if I'm referring to my sister, I would say Airaha, which means she is my sibling of the opposite sex. Right? And only a male would use this, of course. Right? My sister. And it has the ha at the end is the diminutive, right? Because of course you're close to this person, right? Of course you're close to this person, and you use this as you use a lot of people. Now for a female speaking, talking about her brother, she will say Haiteraha, which means he is my cross sex or my opposite sex sibling. So that's, that's how you do that. That's one of the things that you do. You're differentiating, but you're not using specifically a term sister or brother. Right? Not using. Okay. Now, mothers and fathers. Okay. Now there's a verb to be mother to, right? And there is a verb to be father to. So those do have the gender built into them, right? Now, if you're just, there's a verb that's only used to address your mother. You would address her as Ana'a, Ana'a. And that means, you're addressing, Ana'a, my mother, which is, of course, a very respectful term. Now, there's another verb that's used when you're referring to a mother, not addressing one, but referring. A whole different verb is used, which is interesting. Now, if I want to refer to your mother, I would say Sadwe, which means she is mother to you. She is mother to you. Right? So, and the agent or subject is the she part, and the other is the object part. Now, if I want to refer to, if I'm talking about a male's mother, I would say Hondouin. She is mother to him, his mother, right? She is mother to him, his mother. And I talked last time about how the H is an indicator of being male. An H at the beginning of the word, there's a male there somewhere. This was problematic for the Jesuits, and they made a lot of gender mistakes in talking because they didn't hear the initial H. It wasn't something that they could hear and consider distinctive, which the Wendat must have laughed a lot at. Hey, what? I could just see that. The elder that taught me, Ojibwe, talked about how there was a minister who thought that the children of his community were very respectful because they came to his talks. But Fred Wheatley said, we went because we would laugh at how badly he spoke our language. So I imagine, I can imagine the Wendat kids doing that. Look, he's gonna call him a girl, that kind of stuff. Okay, now for father, there is a verb to be father to. So if I'm talking about your father, I would say he is father to you, your father. He is father to you, your father. And if you're saying he is father to him or to her, you would say hoyistan. And again, you see that H, and it's an indicator. It tells you something. Now,
John, you might want to move the document a little bit so that we can see what you just talked about
okay,
from
okay.
others, and I believe you can do that.
All right,
Yeah,
we'll see.
wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, yeah, here we go. Here we go. Good, good, good. All right. So there we have father, the first two terms for father. Now, the last one was used, squadistan is used in the Our Father or the Lord's Prayer. And it is you to us, our Father. They got that one right away, right? So it's, that's an important term. And yeah, and the Lord's Prayer, that was really important and was one thing that they would be able to get right and got right away. All right, let's see where we're going now, man. That's good. All right. Now, whoa, if there's anything I've missed so far, just be careful here.
Any questions in the meantime? No? Okay.
Okay, if we're talking about relationships, there's also friends. So friends is also a verb, to be friend too. Now, one thing I would say, addressing, oh, could you please repeat the verb only used to address your own mother? And is my mother. I'm addressing you as my mother. Okay, so now with friends, there's no distinction between subject and object. There's no agent and patient. Well, there is a patient, but it's the subject, which does happen, often happens, that what is called the patient form is the subject. So, oh yeah, I was going to say, if I were addressing like an all Wendat group and I wanted to address them respectfully, I would say kwe oyawatero, which means hello, we are friends. We are friends. We are friends. So you have here the forms that are used that are the patient only, no agent. So if there's two of us, I would say, oh yeah, Tero, we two are friends, we two are companions. Now, also in this list, let's see if I can get down to it now. Come on. Man, it's not moving. Curses.
Yeah. John, you can also show us on the document by using the arrow if you like. Just
okay. How do I do that?
well, you just did what you did a few minutes ago.
Yeah, that's what I thought I did. Oh, okay. All right, now she's moving.
And I think it's further up. Maybe. I think I saw friends further up. No.
Okay, we'll see, because it could very well be.
Siblings, maybe. No, maybe not.
No, it's the other way.
That's okay. It's all right.
Come on. Having a problem. Now, someone asked a question about the feminine zoic. Now, the feminine zoic refers to she, obviously by the feminine. The zoic, and that's the term Iroquoianists use for this, means it refers as well to anything that is just it. It is this way, it is that way, it is in this state. Refers to animals, and it refers to objects as well as the feminine, right? You will find that right across the board in Iroquois languages. Now, here, let's see, can I move this? No, I'm still giving me a hard time. Ah,
I believe also what you're talking about is in the document that you sent us beforehand, John.
yeah, yeah.
So if everybody wants to check the document that was sent beforehand, I think it's you'll find all the information there.
Working. Okay. Now there is another thing that is where the male and the female differentiate. In the plural, the feminine zoic plural refers to all females. Right? So the feminine zoic plural refers to all females in the crowd. Now, the male plural form refers to all males or males and females. Right? Yeah, it is a bit gendered, a bit sexist, but it's the way they do. I mean, you had to, yeah, no. So it is a distinction they make in the plural. Okay. Any questions about that? So if you're saying they, females, are friends, companions, you'd say ondatero. If it's male, you'd say hondatero. Or if it was a mixed group of people, right? You would say that. Now, so far in talking about verbs, I've talked about the pronominal prefixes. I've talked about the verb root, of course, and the aspect. Now, usually in a verb, there's what's called a root suffix, which means it's a suffix, comes right after the verb root. Right? And there can be more than one in a verb. Typical verb will have a verb root. Now, one of the more common ones is called the causative instrumental. I wouldn't have called it that, but it wasn't up to me. It was already named when I got to it. And it has the sense of made or making, made or making. So if you add this and it's an ST, you add this to it and then the aspect comes after that. So when you have that 4 parts, typical 4-part word is pronominal prefix, verb root, root suffix, and aspect. Now, if I'd say, we two are making friends or have made friends, I would add the causative instrumental to it. So I would say, we two are making or have made friends, oyaterohosti, right? And that's saying, there's causation involved, causes happen. We have become friends, right? Well, anyway, I won't get into that. I just thought, okay. So you can do it for 2 again, and you can do this for plural. Now, you can use this also. I think I have a question here. Or maybe not. No, I don't. Okay, good.
There is a question from Peter.
Okay.
Is there a general animate, inanimate distinction? And is it arbitrary?
It doesn't exist like it does in Algonquian languages, right?
Oh.
Okay, so it doesn't have that category of things that are, I mean, typically, if you have a noun and you're referring to it, and just a noun by itself, probably going to be feminine zoic. but there's no classification system like you have to learn when you learn Anishinaabe. You know, it's nothing like that. Right? It's not there. It's not there at all.
Marie-Christine's got a question too.
Yes, John, I have a very brief remarks to do regarding the name for mother, Sandwan.
Yeah.
What you wrote in the handout. But if I look in the dictionary of Gabriel Sagar,
Oh yeah.
he wrote Hundron. I'm sorry about the pronunciation.
No.
Do you think the difference could be subject to dialect, difference dialectal diversity or something like that?
Let's see. I'm gonna
Yeah, it's the
buy
beginning.
a copy.
Oh yeah.
Now, let's see. Where do we have? There shouldn't be a. I'm trying to find out where it is in the book.
It's in my. It's parentage, consanguinité.
Oh yeah, okay. Parentage. Okay, that's all right.
The beginning is different.
Well, he wasn't all that good at the beginning of words.
Yeah. So
But-
you think it's the year of Sagar?
Yeah, I think because he was starting it up, and I'm just trying to find it. Oh, I know where I could look. Okay. 108.
But you have in the Sagar dictionary, Sandwan means ta mère with the.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different, but.
Yeah, because it would be, where's it, S-O in his dialect?
Yeah,
In his writing?
yeah, you have
It would be S-A. It's just how he heard it. Because it was a nasalized vowel, and sometimes they can sound a lot like each other. So
okay.
it would be, I could see him making that mistake. It wouldn't be difficult for him to make a mistake.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Lee's got a question too. Is the cognitive instrumental the same as the suffix st that Jesuits added to the sacred things in their views, like church, Eucharist, etc.?
Okay. No. Sorry, I didn't. It's a causative instrumental. There is a word. Yatoyan, which means to be, it's a really hard translation, which means the verb root is toyan, and it means to be sacred. Yes, it means to be true. It means to be fixed, and fixed in the sense of for all time. Now, when you add the causative instrumental to that, you get that ST ending. So you're right that in those words there is the causative instrumental. It's just that the verb that comes, it's attached to that particular, very hard to translate simply verb.
Okay. Thank you, John. We had a message from Vincent apologizing because he has to leave.
That's okay. I understand.
Any other questions? Okay, so go ahead.
Okay. So when you adopt a child, you would also use the ST, the causative instrumental. So if I say I am adopting, have adopted her as my child, I would say Yowen Asti. I have made her my child. I have made her my child. And they did adopt. I think historians have traditionally missed out on how much adoption there was of people from different backgrounds. All of the priests were adopted into a clan. I would love to have known what clan Brave Wolf was adopted into, but I don't know. I'm better with the Wyandotte stuff because of the 18th century records being much more clear, but people were adopted. People were adopted. And Laval was adopted into the Bear Clan. He had a Bear Clan name. He couldn't have a Bear Clan name if he wasn't adopted into that. So there was a lot of adoption. The Haudenosaunee adopted a lot of Wendat. They didn't just, drive them out of Ontario. They didn't just defeat them. They adopted a lot of people. One reason why for the wars they had with each other at the time of early contact was they were losing people. I mean, Champlain attacked the Mohawk in a really nasty way, taking my Mohawk perspective, right? And so they needed people, so they adopted them. Joseph Brant had a Wendat ancestor. When, Joseph Brant is a very important person, right? But they adopted a lot of people. A lot of the great people of the Wendat and Wyandot people were adopted, or the children of people who were adopted. There was somebody who wrote a book about, I think it was the Fox, and he took a very Fox-centric point of view and talked about how nasty the Wyandot were in slaughtering all of these Fox people. But if he had looked at the Wendat material, Wyandot material, he would have noticed that one of the elders, female elders among the Wyandot, was Fox. She was adopted and she became an elder because she was a wise woman. And a lot of people, one year, there were a lot of people adopted from the Fox. There's a real mixture of people. And same with the Wendat, there was a real mixture of people. But that tends not, again, so your traditional European-centric historian is just going to think of it, like, okay, they fought each other, therefore they just killed each other. No. And it was good to have somebody adopted from another people, particularly if you were going to negotiate and talk with them, to have a fluent speaker. It was very, very helpful. And, anyway, so that's one of my little peeves there. Okay, now I talked about, spouses. There's also a term to marry. There's a verb root that means to marry. Let's see, did I put that there? Okay. Ndaye, which means to marry, and you would refer to somebody with the stative and say, Hondayi, he is married. He is married, right? Hondayi, she is married. You would refer to them with that, and it's a state, right? You would never use the habitual with that because that suggests, oh, he's often married. You would never say that, but it's, again, and there's only, and it is a form in which the patient is the subject. And usually when a noun, when a verb is in the stative, the patient is the subject, usually, and there's only one person or one group of people referred to. The patient is the subject. I don't know why that is. It's sort of like it's almost a passive. It's saying it occurred to the person, not that the person did it. So if you say he is married, you're not saying he went and got himself married. You're saying that's the state he's in. That's the state he's in. So any other questions? Let's move on.
Oui, Lélia a une question. On ne t'entend pas, Lélia.
Okay, sorry. I have a short question. Are there many words from onomatopoeic root?
There, yeah. Sorry, animal names, obviously. Yeah. Usually, it's. Oh, I see a question now. Usually, the bird names. Most bird names are like that. Like there are names for crow and raven that really, have caw in them, right? So yeah, of course. That's the way. That's the way. Now, I just saw somebody asked about Toronto. Okay, this is one of my causes because I'm a Toronto boy. It is originally a Mohawk term. It applied not to anywhere in Toronto, but to the Atherley Narrows between Lakes Couchiching and Lake Simcoe.
Mhm.
And when it first applied, the Mohawk word is Tikeronto, which means where there are trees or pools in water. It referred to, in that area, the shallow waters, and what the people had done, and the archaeologists tell us, for thousands of years there, is put cedar poles in the water so that the fish can't swim through, but the water is flowing fast, so you get a great collection of fish so people can spear fish or net fish and get a lot. Now, in the early 18th century, when French were going into the Toronto area, well, they would go up the Humber, take the Humber as far as they could, portage to Lake Simcoe and that kind of thing. So this was the route, because Lake Simcoe at the northeast end, that's where Tikeronto is. It was the route to Tikeronto. So it appeared, and because French and English don't have a t in their language, the K was dropped and it just became Toronto, and they misspelled it instead of TA, which it should be. Now there's a personal name, Keronto, that refers to, again, in Wendat, that refers to being a tree or pole in water. So, but you just keep getting bad stuff. I keep reading that. Always infuriates me to say, oh, it's a Wendat word and it was referred to this area only relatively lately. It's how you got to Tikeronto. Toronto was that. Had nothing to do with anything other than the Humber River, which I like, but yeah, it's one of those. And generally speaking, Indigenous names for places are undervalued and presented badly.
Mhm.
And yet, 4 of our provinces and 2 of our territories have Indigenous names. So, Quebec, obviously, it narrows, referring, of course, to where Quebec City is, where there's the big island, Ile d'Orléans, right? And so it narrows. So, Ontario, we said. Manitoba, the Spirit Strait. In Lake Manitoba, there is a place where a strait of water, where the water flows over these rocks and it makes a sound that can with a good imagination be spirits. So Manitou, of course, is the Algonquian word for spirit. And then Saskatchewan means fast flowing water, or as the people in Swift Current don't know, that's where they got their name for their city from. I'm sure if you asked 100 people in Swift Current, they wouldn't mention Cree at all. But yeah, it's the respect for the words and that that's a big issue with me. That Niagara, oh yeah, Niagara is a neutral word, and it refers to a neck, and it referred to the Niagara River. It didn't refer to the falls at all.
Mm-hmm.
But it referred to that part, and it cuts off the space between the two lakes like a neck does, which is a good description. Right? But you go to Niagara Falls and they'll say all these sort of romantic sounding noises. Always say that English speakers are like small children talking about sex. They really don't know what they're talking about, but they can be very assured that they can feel that they're right. And it's just so frustrating because it's just so disrespectful not to know.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, John. Any other questions? Just checking there. I'm checking the chat too. No, for now everybody's. Oh yes, Peter's got a question. Peter and Colin. So Peter first.
Okay.
Can the spectral affixes be isolated? For example, is there a specific stative affix distinct from the verb root? I always found it confusing because it seems that an aspect can be expressed in various ways.
It can. For example, the stative is often an E sound, but sometimes it doesn't add anything at all. It's sometimes all, but sometimes it doesn't add anything at all. It's just, it's just implied because there's nothing added, it's implied. The same true for the punctual. The habitual always adds something, usually an ah sound, but no, sometimes it doesn't add anything and you just have to understand it's there. Okay, there was another question.
Yes, Colin.
Yeah, thanks again for all this, John. At the beginning, you mentioned a word, a place name for the area near Glendon, the beautiful place or something like that.
Yeah.
Would you be able to spell that?
Sure.
Or put it into the chat or something? Or?
I think I gave it as an example. I mean, anyway, I'll spell it out for you. Okay. It's going to take a while. It's a long word. Okay. ETHENNON HAWASTINNEN.
So STINNEN
at the end. Yeah.
Okay. It is pretty long. Yeah.
Yeah. The I there near the end is the stative, and it refers to where they had a beautiful or good life. The word yawasti, the verb yawasti, means to be beautiful or to be good.
Okay, thank you.
So I love it when I saw that term for the first time, other than saying, boy, people are going to have a heck of a time saying that. I thought, what a great name. That came from the Wendat. Beautiful, beautiful name.
Mm-hmm.
We have to rename Glendon with that name somewhere, Colin.
Well,
I think a shorter name. Why not just call it Yawasti? It's beautiful, right? That would be good. It would be short.
Yeah.
a short would be good. Yeah. No,
Yeah. The short is always, yeah.
Yeah. I have a totally different question, if you don't mind. I think we're sort of out of time, but I'm wondering about reading somebody like Laurentien.
Yeah.
And who talks about this creates this conversation with the Wendat.
Yeah.
And is there any way that we can read through the French that he is actually understanding, he has a knowledge of Wendat? Like because I'm really struck by the relational aspect of the language, and how a person, a French speaker or an English speaker might translate that when they're writing it. I mean, or or is it just fictional? It's just making it
Well, with La Montagne, you kind of think everything's fictional.
yeah.
Unfortunately, one of the most unfortunate things about his writing was that he, the person that was known as Rat, he said was Sastoretsi, but he wasn't. The two were very different. A person called Rat, which is a name for muskrat. It was, he was the speaker for the people. The Sastor, like for the Wyandot people, their chiefs were long called Sastoretsi, which means it was a deer clan name, and it referred to having long antler prongs, right? Because, you know, deer clan, right? Just like many of the chiefs of the Wendat for a long time were called Sawehohi. Now, unfortunately, the Jesuits thought that they were referring to vultures, because the vultures in Europe are not closely related to the vultures here in Canada. The vultures in Europe are related to raptors, whereas ours are related to herons and cranes. And there weren't vultures in Ontario until the late 19th century, just like there weren't vultures in Quebec until the late 19th century. So Sawehohi really refers to a kind of eagle. The name just slid out of my head. Osprey, yeah. It refers to the osprey, which technically isn't an eagle, which bothers me, but yeah, osprey. So osprey was a great name, but even unfortunately in Wendake, people will say, oh yeah, it meant vulture. No, it didn't. You're compounding the mistake of the Jesuits and the other people who were used to vultures looking a particular way. No, it's osprey, which are fantastic, beautiful, beautiful eagles, even though their sound is hideous, but they're beautiful, beautiful birds.
Mhm.
Have you ever seen them catch a fish in the water? They go right out of the sky, pow, to pick up a fish. They're brilliant. I love them.
Thank you, John. Any other questions? I'm looking at possible hands there. No. Checking my chat box. No. So you have the final word, John, if you want.
Okay, so in the class 2 weeks from now, I'll be talking about numbers, which is really, really interesting, you know, and I'll be talking about time
Mm-hmm.
and a few other, and just how they expressed it, you know, how they would express it, you know, and and to no surprise, almost every number contains at least one verb. The big ones, like the number, if you're in the thousands and something, you'll like have 4 verbs. But only the numbers 3 to 9 are not verbs. All the others are verbs. So it reinforces the major lesson that everything is a verb. You know, if you want to understand it, look up a verb. But I mean, nouns usually appear within a verb, like in Tikaranto or in Mohawk. The rant means tree or pole. So your usual verb has a noun in it.
Very interesting. Yeah. So we do have, or I think we sent the handout for lesson number 3, but we'll send it around again so that we'll have it, and we'll try and make sure next time that we've got you and the your handout
Now,
on the screen so that everybody can follow instead of going back.
I like that. I like that.
Great. Yeah, we'll try and get this. Oh, how do you say thanks? Asks Ian.
Well, you would say it in Wendat, you'd say Nyawink, Nyawink. In Wyandotte, you'd say anyway. Yeah, yeah. But there's no word for you're welcome. I had somebody ask me if there's a term for you're welcome, and I said no, they don't do that settler stuff, which was fun because it got a powerful reaction. No, they don't do that settler stuff. You're welcome. Thank you is enough. You don't have to keep on talking.
So I think we'll have to learn to all say together, just like the traditional way of learning a lesson. We'll all repeat at the end, thank you. So how do you say thank you again?
Okay. I keep shifting in this. Nyawik.
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 Oh, yeah.
Nyawik.
Yeah.
So you just got 16 Nyawik.
That's, I appreciate that. And I won't say you're welcome because, as we know, we don't do that settler stuff.
We don't.
And a lot of congratulation message too. So
yeah, so
we're
from
fascinated,
Lydia.
and thank you so much, John. It was a lovely lecture.
Well, it's fun to do. I love doing this.
Yeah. It's fun also to listen. It's very fascinating. So
indeed,
let's meet in 2 weeks.
Yes, we will. And we'll send you, just in case you lose the link, we'll send you the link again and the handout and everything.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And everybody have a wonderful weekend. And for some of us, in about 20 minutes at the Faculty Council.
Ooh, better you than me.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you, everyone, for coming.